The first lecture hall was bigger than any classroom Hannah had ever seen on Earth. Rows of seats curved around a central platform where Professor Vorthak stood next to a display that showed floating mathematical equations. The formulas moved and changed in the air like living things. Hannah found a seat in the back corner where she hoped nobody would notice her. The other students were already there when she arrived. Most were Valthrons like the professor, but she also saw some of the crystal beings called Nixari, and a few with the large heads that belonged to the Othek species. None of them looked at her. They were all focused on their own advanced recording devices and note-taking systems. Their equipment made her simple crystal tablet look like a toy. Today we continue our study of quantum dimensional barriers, Professor Vorthak began. His voice filled the room without effort. As you know from your previous studies, these barriers exist between different layers of reality. They cannot be crossed by normal matter or energy. Hannah activated her recording device and began to take notes. The translation system worked hard to change the professor's words into something she could understand. Sometimes it gave her 3 different possible meanings for the same word. The frequency range of 847.2 to 851.7 tetracycles creates an absolute barrier. The professor continued. No known force can penetrate this range. This has been proven by over 2,000 years of experimentation. The other students nodded and made notes. They all seemed to understand perfectly. Hannah wrote down what she heard, even though she was not sure what tetracycles were or how frequencies could create barriers. After 2 hours, the lecture ended. The other students gathered their things and left without speaking to each other or to her. Hannah stayed behind for a moment, looking at the floating equations that were still moving above the platform. "Is there a problem?" Professor Vorthak asked. He had noticed her sitting there. "No, sir. I was just trying to understand the math." The professor made that amused sound again. "The mathematics require an understanding of 12-dimensional space and quantum probability fields. Your species has not yet discovered these concepts. Could you recommend some basic materials I could study?" Professor Vorthak looked surprised by the question. "There are learning programs in the library designed for younger students. They might be at your level." The way he said it made it clear. He thought she was wasting her time, but Hannah thanked him anyway. The library was even bigger than the lecture hall. It had millions of books, data crystals, and holographic displays. Most of the information was in alien languages, but the library system could translate basic materials for her. Hannah found the children's section and started with something called Introduction to Multidimensional Mathematics for Young Minds. It was designed for 10-year-old Valthran students, but it was still difficult for her to follow. She spent 3 hours that first day trying to understand concepts that the alien children learned as easily as human children learned to add and subtract. By the time she left, her head hurt from thinking so hard. The second lecture was on Energy Manipulation in Dimensional Spaces. Professor Zelana Mithros, a female Valthran with lighter blue skin, taught this class. She spoke about exotic matter and how it behaved differently in various dimensional layers. "Exotic matter particles can exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously," Professor Mithros explained. "When they encounter dimensional barriers, they create energy signatures in the 849.3 to 850.1 tetracycle range." Hannah wrote this down carefully. Then she stopped and looked at her notes from the previous day. Professor Vorthak had said that nothing could penetrate the 847.2 to 851.7 range, but Professor Mithros was saying that exotic matter created energy signatures in the 849.3 to 850.1 range. That range was inside the supposedly impenetrable barrier zone. She read both notes several times to make sure she had not made a mistake. The translation device showed the same information both times. Either she was misunderstanding something, or the 2 professors were saying different things about the same topic. That night, she went back to the library and found more basic materials about dimensional barriers and exotic matter. The children's books explained that dimensional barriers were like walls between different rooms of reality. Exotic matter was described as special particles that could sometimes act like they were in more than one room at the same time. If that was true, Then how could there be an absolute barrier that nothing could cross? The third lecture was back with Professor Vorthak. This time he talked about historical failures in dimensional manipulation. He showed examples of experiments that had failed because scientists tried to cross dimensional barriers. Every attempt to penetrate the absolute barrier range has resulted in complete failure, he said. The energy simply disappears, converted into unusable quantum static. But Hannah remembered Professor Mithros mentioning successful exotic matter experiments that created energy signatures in that same range. If the energy disappeared as quantum static, how could it create measurable signatures? She started keeping 2 sets of notes. One set was the simple transcription that Professor Vorthak expected. The other set was her own questions and observations about things that did not seem to fit together. During her 4th visit to the library, she met another human. Park Ji-won was part of the maintenance crew that kept the Institute's complex systems running. He was older than Hannah and had been working there for 6 months. "You are the exchange student," he said when he saw her struggling with a holographic display. "I heard about you from the other workers. You are the first human I have seen here besides myself," Hannah replied, switching to Korean with relief. Jae-won laughed. "There are 3 of us on the maintenance team. We keep the quantum generators running and fix the environmental systems. Not as glamorous as being a student, but we get to see how everything works." He helped her figure out the display controls, then sat down beside her. "What are you studying?" "I am supposed to be taking notes during lectures, but I keep finding things that do not make sense. Different professors say different things about the same topics." Jae-won nodded. "I see that in the technical manuals too. The aliens are very smart, but they seem to learn everything separately. They do not always talk to each other about their work. On Earth, scientists share their research and check each other's findings." "Exactly. Here, each department works alone. They have so much respect for their professors that they do not question anything. If Professor A says one thing and Professor B says something different, they just assume both are right somehow." This gave Hannah an idea. Maybe the contradictions she was seeing were not mistakes in her understanding. Maybe they were real problems that nobody else was noticing because they were not looking for them. Over the next week, she attended more lectures and spent more time in the library. She found basic courses on quantum mechanics, energy field theory, and dimensional mathematics. Slowly, very slowly, she began to understand enough to see more patterns. By the end of her 2nd week, she had filled 3 notebooks with questions and contradictions. The professors were brilliant, but their theories did not always agree with each other, and none of the students seemed to notice or care. Hannah realized that her job as a note-taker might be more important than anyone expected. She was the only one comparing what different professors were teaching. She was the only one asking if all of these brilliant theories actually fit together. Maybe being an outsider was not such a disadvantage after all. Hannah stepped off the transport shuttle and looked up at the massive building in front of her. The Galactic Sciences Institute stretched high into the purple sky of Centauri Prime. Its crystal walls caught the light from 3 different suns and threw rainbow patterns across the ground. She had never seen anything so beautiful or so scary at the same time. Her hands shook a little as she held her small bag of belongings. Inside were just a few clothes, her personal tablet from Earth, and a letter from her mother wishing her luck. Everything else she needed was supposed to be provided by the Institute. At least that was what they told her. The other beings walking around the entrance area were much taller than her. Most of them had blue skin that seemed to glow with its own light. These were the Veilthrons, the species that ran the Institute. They moved in smooth, careful ways that made Hannah feel clumsy just watching them. Their voices made musical sounds when they spoke to each other in their own language. A few other species walked among them. Hannah saw beings that looked like they were made of living crystal, and others with heads that seemed too big for their bodies. All of them looked important and smart. She felt very small and very human. Hannah, of Earth. The voice came from behind her. She turned to see a tall Veilthron approaching. His blue skin was darker than the others, and he wore long robes that moved like water around his body. "I am Professor Kale Vorthak. You are the human exchange student." It was not a question. Professor Vorthak looked down at her with large, golden eyes that seemed to see right through her. Hana tried to stand up straighter. "Yes, sir, I am very honored to be here." The professor made a sound that might have been amusement. "Honor? Yes. Follow me. There are things you must understand about your time here." They walked through corridors filled with floating displays and students of different species. Hana tried not to stare too much, but everything was so different from anything on Earth. The walls showed moving pictures of distant galaxies and mathematical formulas that hurt her head to look at. Professor Vorthak led her to a small office that looked out over the institute's main courtyard. Through the window she could see students sitting in groups under strange trees with silver leaves. None of them looked human. "Sit," the professor said, pointing to a chair that adjusted itself to fit her body. "We must discuss your role here." Hana sat carefully. The chair was more comfortable than anything she had ever experienced, but she still felt nervous. The council agreed to accept one human student as an experiment, Professor Vorthak continued. "Your species has recently discovered faster-than-light travel. This is impressive for such a young civilization. However, you must understand that you are far behind the other species in this institute." The words stung, but Hana had expected them. Earth had only made contact with galactic civilization 5 years ago. Humans were definitely the new kids in the neighborhood. The courses here covered topics that your species has not yet discovered: quantum dimensional theory, multi-state particle manipulation, advanced consciousness mathematics. These subjects are taught at a level that assumes thousands of years of scientific development. Hana nodded. She had studied hard to prepare for this opportunity, but she knew there would be huge gaps in her knowledge. Therefore, Professor Vorthak said, "You will not be taking classes like the other students. Instead, you will serve as a note-taker for my advanced lectures. You will record what is said and transcribe it for our records. This will allow you to observe our methods while providing a useful service to the Institute." "Note-taking?" Hana repeated. She had expected to struggle with advanced classes, but she had hoped to at least try learning alongside the other students. "Yes, you will attend my lectures on dimensional barrier theory. These sessions occur 3 times each week. Your job will be to create accurate records of everything that is discussed. The translation systems will help you understand the basic concepts, though much of the deeper meaning will likely be beyond your comprehension." The professor handed her a small device that looked like a crystal tablet. "This is a recording unit. It will capture audio and translate it into your language. However, many of our concepts do not exist in human languages, so some things will remain unclear to you." Hana took the device carefully. It felt warm in her hands and seemed to pulse with a gentle light. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning. The first lecture begins at what you would call 8 o'clock. Do not be late. The other students are very serious about their studies, and I will not allow disruptions." As if she had been dismissed, Professor Vorthak turned to his desk and began working on something that made the air shimmer around his hands. Hana stood up slowly. "Professor," she said, "may I ask what topics you will be covering?" He looked up, with those golden eyes again. "Dimensional barriers are the walls that separate different layers of reality. Understanding them is crucial for advanced space travel and energy manipulation. We have been studying them for over 3,000 years, yet many mysteries remain. And I will just be taking notes? You will be recording information that more qualified beings will later analyze," he said. "It is important work, even if it is simple work." Hana left the office feeling disappointed but trying to stay positive. At least she was here. At least she would be learning something, even if it was just by listening. She had beaten thousands of other humans just to get this chance. The dormitory they assigned to her was small but comfortable. It had a window that looked out at the alien landscape and a bed that adjusted to her body temperature. There was a small desk with a computer terminal that could connect to Earth if she needed to contact home. She set down her bag and looked around. This would be her home for the next year. Tomorrow she would start her new job as a note-taker. It was not what she had dreamed of, but it was a beginning. That night, Hana called home using the quantum communication system. Dr. Kim Sunho, her supervisor from the Korean Space Research Institute, appeared on the screen. "How was your first day?" he asked in Korean. It felt good to hear her own language after a day of translated alien speech. "I will be taking notes during advanced lectures," she told him. "Not exactly what I hoped for, but I will learn what I can." Dr. Kim smiled. "Sometimes the best opportunities come from unexpected places. Keep your eyes open and your mind active. You are representing all of humanity there." After the call ended, Hana sat by her window and looked out at the alien stars. 3 moons hung in the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the institute grounds. Tomorrow she would begin her work as a simple note-taker. She had no idea that within 3 weeks her notes would change everything. By the start of her 3rd week, Hana had filled 6 notebooks with observations. Every night after the lectures, she compared what different professors had taught. The contradictions were getting harder to ignore. Professor Vorthak insisted that dimensional barriers at certain frequencies were completely solid. Professor Mithros talked about exotic matter creating energy patterns in those same frequency ranges. Professor Thane Korvek from the Advanced Physics Department claimed that quantum tunneling was impossible through dimensional barriers, but Professor Lysa Nethys from Theoretical Studies had mentioned successful tunneling experiments. Hana decided it was time to write a real report instead of just simple notes. She spent 3 days working on it. She used the basic mathematical concepts she had learned from the children's books and tried to explain the problems she saw in simple terms. She made charts showing where different theories disagreed with each other. She even suggested some possible explanations for why these contradictions existed. The finished report was 12 pages long. It was much more detailed than the simple transcriptions Professor Vorthak expected, but Hana hoped it would be useful. She submitted the report through the Institute's computer system and waited nervously for a response. Professor Vorthak called her to his office the next morning. He did not look pleased. "This is not what I asked for," he said, holding up a printed copy of her report. "I requested simple transcription of lectures, not amateur analysis of advanced theories." "I am sorry, Professor. I thought the analysis might be helpful." "Helpful?" His golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. "You have been here for less than 3 weeks. These theories have been developed and refined by the greatest minds in the galaxy over thousands of years. What makes you think you can find problems that we have missed?" Hana felt her face get hot with embarrassment. "I did not mean to suggest that the professors were wrong. I just noticed some differences between what different departments are teaching. Differences that you, with your primitive understanding, think are important." Professor Vorthak set the report aside. "I will overlook this mistake, but in the future, stick to simple note-taking. That is what you are here for." Hana left his office feeling terrible. Maybe she had been foolish to think her observations mattered. These beings were far more advanced than humans. Who was she to question their understanding? But as she walked back to her dormitory, she passed the physics laboratory where Park Jae-won was working on a quantum generator. He looked up when he saw her sad expression. "Bad day?" he asked in Korean. "I think I made Professor Vorthak angry. I wrote a report pointing out contradictions between different lectures, and he told me I was being presumptuous." Jae-won put down his tools. "What kind of contradictions?" Hana explained some of the problems she had found. Jae-won listened carefully, asking questions about the technical details. "You know," he said finally, "I see similar problems in the maintenance manuals. Different departments give us different information about how the same systems work. We just follow whatever manual applies to the specific job, but sometimes the instructions conflict with each other. Does that cause problems?" "Sometimes." Last month, the environmental department told us to set the atmospheric processors to 1 frequency, but the energy department said that frequency would interfere with the power systems. We had to find a compromise, but neither department wanted to admit their specifications might be wrong. This made Hana feel a little better. At least she was not the only one noticing these kinds of problems. That afternoon, she was surprised to receive a message requesting a meeting with Dr. Lysen Korthek. He was one of the younger Valthran professors, and she had never spoken to him before. His office was smaller than Professor Vorthak's, and the walls were covered with charts and Equations. Dr. Korthek was tall like all Velthrons, but his blue skin was lighter, and he seemed less formal than the older professors. "Please sit," he said. "I wanted to discuss your report." Hana's heart sank. "Professor Vorthak already explained that I overstepped my role. I will be more careful in the future." "Actually," Dr. Korthek said, "I found your report quite interesting." Professor Vorthak shared it with several colleagues because he thought it was amusing. But when I read it, I saw something different. He pulled up a holographic display showing some of the charts from her report. "You identified 12 major contradictions between different departmental theories. I spent the last 2 days checking your observations, and I found that 11 of them point to genuine problems in our understanding." "Really?" Hana could hardly believe it. "Really. For example, you noticed that Professor Vorthak teaches that dimensional barriers are absolute in certain frequency ranges, while Professor Mithros demonstrates exotic matter effects in those same ranges. I ran some calculations, and it appears that both could be correct if dimensional barriers are not fixed walls, but dynamic membranes that respond to specific conditions." Dr. Korthek manipulated the holographic display to show moving equations. "Your human tendency to compare information from different sources revealed something that our specialized education system causes us to miss. We learn each subject separately, and rarely question how they fit together. So the barriers might not be solid walls?" "Exactly. They might be more like flexible boundaries that can be influenced by the right combination of frequency and exotic matter resonance. This could explain why Professor Mithros sees energy signatures where Professor Vorthak expects complete blockage." Hana felt excitement building in her chest. "Could this be tested?" "I think it could. In fact, your report has given me ideas for several experiments. But first, I want to see more of your analysis. Are you willing to continue this kind of comparative study?" "Professor Vorthak told me to stick to simple note-taking." Dr. Korthek smiled, an expression that looked strange on a Velthran face but somehow seemed genuine. "Professor Vorthak is a brilliant physicist, but he is also very traditional. He believes that knowledge should follow established hierarchies. I think knowledge should follow evidence regardless of where it comes from. What do you want me to do?" "Keep doing exactly what you have been doing. Take notes in different lectures, compare the information, and look for patterns or problems. Send your analysis to me instead of Professor Vorthak. I will make sure it gets the attention it deserves." Hana left Dr. Korthek's office feeling completely different than when she had left Professor Vorthak's earlier that day. Maybe her human perspective was not a weakness after all. Maybe seeing things differently was exactly what this advanced civilization needed. That evening, she called Dr. Kim Sun-ho on Earth and told him about her day. "I am very proud of you," he said. "You are doing exactly what a good scientist should do. You are asking questions and looking for truth, even when others tell you to stop. But what if I am wrong about the contradictions? Then you will learn something from being wrong. But what if you are right? What if your questions lead to new understanding? That is what science is about." After the call, Hana sat down with her notebooks and started planning her next report. She had 3 more weeks of lectures to analyze, and now she knew that at least one professor was interested in her findings. She had no idea that her next report would shake the foundations of galactic science. Word of Hana's analysis spread through the institute faster than she expected. By the 4th week, she noticed other students looking at her during lectures. Some seemed curious, others appeared annoyed. The crystalline Nexari students, who rarely acknowledged anyone outside their own species, actually turned their faceted heads to study her. Dr. Korthek had shared her second report with more colleagues. This one was even more detailed than the first. Hana had found connections between dimensional theory, quantum mechanics, and energy manipulation that crossed 5 different departments. She suggested that many of the galaxy's unsolved problems might be connected to the same fundamental misunderstanding about how dimensional barriers worked. The reaction was swift and divided. Professor Vorthak was furious. He requested a formal meeting with the Institute's High Council to address what he called the human problem. Other senior professors supported him, arguing that allowing a primitive species to question established science was dangerous to academic standards, but some of the younger faculty found Hana's ideas fascinating. Dr. Korthek was joined by Professor Nira Valton from the Exotic Matter Department and Dr. Zex Morak from Quantum Studies. They formed an unofficial group to investigate Hana's theories more carefully. The conflict came to a head when Professor Vorthak demanded a formal academic tribunal. According to Institute tradition, any major challenge to established theory had to be defended before a panel of the galaxy's most distinguished scientists. If the challenger could not prove their case, they would be dismissed from the Institute, in disgrace. A tribunal? Hana repeated when Dr. Korthek told her the news. They were sitting in his office, surrounded by holographic displays showing her latest calculations. It is a serious matter, Dr. Korthek admitted. You will have to present your theories to 12 of the most senior professors in galactic science. They will question you extensively and judge whether your ideas have merit. What happens if they decide against me? You would be sent back to Earth immediately, and your analysis would be officially declared invalid. No galactic institution would ever accept human students again. Hana felt her stomach drop. The pressure was enormous. Not only her own future, but the future of all human scientific exchange depended on her ability to defend ideas she had developed in just a few weeks. But what if I am right? If you are right, Dr. Korthek said quietly, you will change how we understand the fundamental nature of reality itself. The tribunal was scheduled for the end of week 5. Hana had 7 days to prepare the most important presentation of her life. She worked 18 hours each day, barely stopping to eat or sleep. Park Jae-won and the other maintenance workers helped however they could. Cho Min-ho, a human data analyst who worked in the Institute's computer center, spent his free time helping Hana run complex simulations to test her theories. Your math is solid, Min-ho told her after running the latest calculations. The computer models support your predictions about dynamic dimensional membranes. If you are wrong, the universe itself is lying to us. The day of the tribunal arrived, gray and cold. The main conference hall had been set up with a single chair in the center, facing a curved table where 12 of the galaxy's most respected scientists sat in judgment. The audience included faculty members, advanced students, and even some government officials who had come to witness the unusual event. Hana walked to the center chair wearing her best clothes, a simple blue dress from Earth that looked very plain, compared to the elaborate robes of the alien professors. She carried her notes and a small holographic projector that Dr. Korthek had helped her program. Professor Vorthak sat at the center of the judging panel. His golden eyes showed no warmth as he spoke. Lee Hana of Earth, you stand accused of promoting theories that contradict thousands of years of established galactic science. You claim that our understanding of dimensional barriers is fundamentally flawed. Do you maintain this position? Yes, honored professors, I do. A murmur went through the audience. Several of the alien students looked shocked that she would directly challenge such distinguished scientists. Then present your case, Professor Vorthak said. You have 1 hour to convince this panel that a species that discovered faster than light travel just 5 years ago can correct theories that have guided galactic civilization for millennia. Hana activated her holographic projector. The display showed a 3-dimensional model of dimensional space with the barriers represented as flexible membranes instead of solid walls. Honored professors, I do not claim that your theories are wrong. I believe they are incomplete. Each department has discovered pieces of a larger truth, but because these pieces are studied separately, no one has seen the complete picture. She walked them through her analysis step by step, using simple language to explain complex concepts. She showed how Professor Vorthak's barrier theories, Professor Mithros's exotic matter research, and Professor Nethys's quantum tunneling experiments all describe different aspects of the same phenomenon. Dimensional barriers are not walls, she concluded. They are dynamic systems that respond to specific combinations of frequency, exotic matter resonance, and quantum field manipulation. This explains why absolute barriers sometimes allow energy signatures through, why quantum tunneling works, in some conditions but not others, and why many previous experiments have given contradictory results. The questioning that followed was intense. Each professor tried to find flaws in her reasoning, errors in her mathematics, or gaps in her understanding. But Hannah had spent weeks preparing for this moment. With help from her human colleagues and support from Dr. Korthek's group, she was ready for their challenges. Professor Yila Nithek, an ancient Valthran with skin so deep blue, it was almost black, asked the final question. Human child, your theory is elegant, but theories must make predictions that can be tested. If dimensional barriers are truly dynamic membranes as you claim, what should we be able to observe that we cannot observe with current understanding? Hannah had hoped for this question. She changed her holographic display to show a star map of the local galaxy. Your records show periodic quantum storms that disrupt space travel in seemingly random patterns. Current theory cannot predict these storms because it treats dimensional barriers as fixed obstacles. My theory suggests these storms occur when multiple barriers resonate together, creating temporary instabilities. She highlighted several regions on the star map. Based on my calculations, the next major storm should occur in the Vega system in approximately 43 days. Current theory predicts no unusual activity in that area. Professor Nethak leaned forward with interest. You are making a specific, testable prediction? Yes, honored professor. If I am wrong about how dimensional barriers work, then the Vega system will remain stable. If I am right, there will be a significant quantum disturbance that matches the pattern I have calculated. The panel of professors looked at each other. Several whispered among themselves in their own languages. Finally, Professor Vorthak spoke. We will monitor the Vega system for the next 43 days. If your prediction proves correct, this tribunal will reconvene to discuss the implications of your theories. If you are wrong, you will leave this institute immediately and never return. I understand, honored professor. As Hannah left the conference hall, she felt the weight of what she had just done. In 43 days, the entire galaxy would know whether humanity's first exchange student was a revolutionary scientist or just an overconfident primitive. Either way, there was no going back now. The 43 days of waiting were the longest of Hannah's life. Every morning she checked the monitoring reports from the Vega system, looking for any sign that her prediction might come true. Every day showed normal readings with no unusual quantum activity. Professor Vorthak seemed confident that her theory would be proven wrong. During lectures, he made comments about the importance of humility and the dangers of premature conclusions. Other senior professors followed his example, using Hannah's situation as a warning to their students about questioning established knowledge. But Dr. Korthek and his supporters continued to study her theories. They ran computer simulations, reviewed historical data, and looked for other ways to test her ideas about dynamic dimensional barriers. The results consistently supported her analysis, but without the dramatic proof that the Vega prediction would provide, they could not convince the wider scientific community. Hannah tried to focus on her regular duties. She still attended lectures and took notes, though now everyone knew she was doing much more than simple transcription. Some students avoided her, afraid to be associated with someone who might soon be disgraced. Others asked questions about her theories, curious about the human perspective on galactic science. The crystalline Nexari were particularly interested. Their species thought in patterns and connections, similar to how Hannah approached problems. A Nexari student named Crix approached her after a lecture on quantum field theory. Your method of cross-referencing different sources is similar to how our minds process information, Crix said, his crystal body refracting light as he spoke. Most species here think in linear progressions, but you think in networks of connections. Is that good or bad? Hannah asked. Different. And difference can be valuable when everyone else thinks the same way. The other human workers at the institute tried to keep her spirits up during the waiting period. Park Jae-won brought her food when she forgot to eat because she was too nervous. Cho Min-ho ran additional computer models to double-check her calculations. Dr. Yoon Sora, who had recently arrived as part of an expanded human exchange program, offered to help with whatever Hannah needed. You have already accomplished something amazing, Dr. Sora told her one evening. Regardless of what happens with the Vega prediction, you have shown that humans can contribute to galactic science. That is not a small thing. But Hana knew that being remembered for trying was not enough. If her prediction failed, it would confirm the belief that humans were not ready for advanced scientific collaboration. It might be decades before another human got the chance she had been given. Day 35 passed with no unusual readings. Day 36 was the same. By day 40, even Dr. Korthek was beginning to look worried. The quantum resonance patterns you predicted should be building by now, he said, reviewing the latest data. If the storm is going to happen on schedule, we should see preliminary fluctuations. Maybe I was wrong about the timing, Hana said, though her calculations had been very precise. Or maybe the storm will be smaller than expected. Or maybe, Dr. Korthek said gently, dimensional barriers really are static structures and your theory is incorrect. Day 42 arrived with still no sign of quantum disturbance in the Vega system. Hana barely slept that night, knowing that tomorrow would determine everything. She woke early on day 43 and immediately checked the monitoring stations. The preliminary reports showed normal readings, same as every other day. Her heart sank. But when she arrived at the institute that morning, she found crowds of students and faculty gathered around the main display screens. Something was happening. Dr. Korthek found her in the crowd. His blue face was glowing with excitement. It started 2 hours ago, he said. Massive quantum fluctuations throughout the Vega system. The pattern matches your predictions exactly. Hana stared at the displays showing real-time data from the distant star system. Waves of quantum energy were rippling through dimensional space, creating the largest storm anyone had recorded in over a century. The disruption was so powerful that ships throughout the region had been forced to drop out of faster-than-light travel to avoid being torn apart. The resonance cascade you described is happening exactly as you calculated, Dr. Korthek continued. Multiple dimensional barriers are oscillating together, creating interference patterns that amplify into a massive instability. More than that, the storm was revealing new information about how dimensional barriers actually worked. As the quantum waves passed through different layers of space, they left traces that confirmed Hana's theory about dynamic membranes responding to specific conditions. Professor Vorthak appeared through the crowd, his expression unreadable. The tribunal will reconvene this afternoon, he announced. We have much to discuss. The second tribunal session was very different from the first. The same 12 distinguished professors sat in judgment, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Instead of skeptical dismissal, Hana sensed genuine interest and even excitement. Professor Vorthak spoke first. Your prediction has proven accurate in every detail. The Vega quantum storm is unfolding exactly as your theory suggested it would. This requires us to seriously reconsider our understanding of dimensional physics. Professor Yila Nethek leaned forward. More than reconsider, Kale. This human has demonstrated that our fundamental assumptions about the nature of dimensional barriers have been wrong for thousands of years. Her theory does not just explain the storm, it explains dozens of previously mysterious phenomena. The questioning this time focused on practical applications. If dimensional barriers were truly dynamic systems that could be influenced and manipulated, what did that mean for space travel, energy production, and scientific research? Your analysis suggests that we could learn to navigate quantum storms. Instead of avoiding them, Professor Zelna Vorthis from the Space Navigation Department said, if barriers can be influenced by the right resonance patterns, we might be able to create safe passages through previously impossible regions of space. That is correct, Hana replied. The storms are not random disasters but natural phenomena following predictable rules. Once we understand those rules, we can work with them instead of against them. The implications went far beyond space travel. Professor Mithros realized that exotic matter research could be revolutionized by treating dimensional barriers as responsive systems instead of static obstacles. The energy department saw possibilities for new forms of power generation. Even the theoretical physicists were excited about exploring dimensions that had been considered permanently inaccessible. As the session continued, something remarkable happened. The professors stopped treating Hana like a student being examined and started talking to her like a colleague whose expertise they respected. They asked her opinion on research projects, invited her to collaborate on experiments, and sought her advice on problems they had been struggling with for years. The question now, Professor Vorthak said finally, is how we move forward. Your theories require us to restructure our entire approach to dimensional physics. This will affect every department in the Institute. More than that, Professor Nethek added, your method of cross-departmental analysis has revealed a fundamental weakness in our educational system. We have become so specialized that we stopped seeing the connections between different fields of study. Dr. Korthek stood up from the audience. I propose that we establish a new department focused on interdisciplinary analysis. Hana should lead this department and train other researchers in her methods. A human leading a galactic research department? Professor Vorthak looked thoughtful. 6 weeks ago, I would have called such an idea absurd. Today, I think it might be necessary. The formal vote was unanimous. Hana Lee, who had arrived at the Institute as a simple note-taker, was appointed director of the new Department of Interdisciplinary Science. Her first assignment was to train a team of researchers from different species in human-style analytical thinking, but perhaps more importantly, her success opened the door for expanded human participation in galactic science. Dr. Yoon Sora was promoted to establish a human cognitive research division. Plans were made to bring more human students and researchers to institutions throughout the galaxy. As Hana left the tribunal hall for the second time, she reflected on how completely her situation had changed. The aliens had given her a notepad and expected simple transcription. Instead, humanity had given them a new way of understanding the universe. Sometimes, she thought, the most primitive approach was exactly what advanced civilizations needed to break through their own limitations. 3 months after arriving as a note-taker, Hana stood in front of her own lecture hall, looking out at an audience she never could have imagined. The seats were filled with advanced students from a dozen different species, all waiting to learn, from the human who had revolutionized dimensional physics. In the front row sat Lee Do-young and Kang Hyerin, 2 new human exchange students who had arrived just last week. Behind them were Valthron graduate students, crystalline Nixari researchers, and even some of the large-headed Othek who rarely showed interest in anything outside their own specialized fields. Welcome to Interdisciplinary Analysis Methods, Hana began, her voice carrying easily through the hall. 3 months ago, most of you would not have believed that a human could teach you anything about science. Today we are going to explore why that assumption was wrong, and how different perspectives can lead to breakthrough discoveries. She activated the holographic display, showing the same mathematical equations that had once confused and intimidated her. Now she understood them well enough to explain them to others. The key to interdisciplinary thinking is not being smarter than specialists in their own fields. It is being willing to ask questions that specialists might not think to ask. It is looking for connections between ideas that are usually studied separately. A young Vielthran student raised her hand. Professor Lee, how do we overcome our natural tendency to think in linear progressions? It still felt strange to be called professor, but Hana was getting used to her new role. Practice seeing problems from multiple angles. When you study quantum mechanics, also think about how it connects to energy manipulation. When you learn about space navigation, consider how it relates to dimensional theory. Look for patterns that cross traditional boundaries. She walked them through examples from her own experience, showing how contradictions between different lectures had led to her breakthrough understanding of dimensional barriers. The students took careful notes, asking thoughtful questions about methodology and approach. After class, Do-young and Hyerin stayed behind to talk with her in Korean. It was still a relief to speak her native language after hours of lectures and translated galactic standard. We heard about what you accomplished here, Do-young said. It is incredible. When we applied for the exchange program, we never imagined we would be studying under a human professor at the most prestigious institute in the galaxy. I never imagined it either, Hana replied. 6 months ago, I was just a pattern analyst for the space navigation program. Now I am trying to teach alien scientists how to think like humans. Is it working? Yaren asked. Hana smiled. Better than I expected. Different species have different cognitive strengths, but they all benefit from learning to approach problems from new directions. The Nixari are particularly good at this because their minds naturally think in interconnected patterns. The Veilthrans struggle more because their culture values hierarchical learning, but once they understand the concept, they are excellent at applying it systematically. Her success had rippled throughout the galactic scientific community far beyond the Institute. The breakthrough in dimensional barrier theory had led to practical applications that were already changing civilization. New navigation systems allowed ships to travel through previously impassable regions of space, cutting travel times by up to 40%. Energy generation methods based on dimensional resonance were being tested on dozens of worlds. More importantly, her analytical methods were being adopted by research institutions across the galaxy. The rigid departmental structure that had dominated galactic science for millennia was slowly giving way to more collaborative, interdisciplinary approaches. Park Jae-won, now promoted to Chief of Maintenance Operations, stopped by her office later that afternoon. Another delegation from the Andromedan Council arrived today, he told her. They want to establish their own department of human cognitive methods. How many is that now? 17 different institutions have sent representatives in the past month. Everyone wants to learn how humans think about scientific problems. It was gratifying but also overwhelming. Hana had gone from being an overlooked note-taker to being one of the most sought-after researchers in the galaxy. Universities competed to hire human faculty. Governments funded programs to bring human students to their worlds. The species that had once considered humans too primitive for serious scientific collaboration now treated human cognitive abilities as a valuable resource. Dr. Kim Sun-ho called her that evening from Earth. His image appeared on the quantum communication screen looking proud but concerned. The Korean government wants to establish a permanent scientific exchange program with 12 different galactic institutions, he told her. They are offering full scholarships for Korean students to study throughout the galaxy, and they want to bring alien researchers to Earth. That is wonderful news, Hana said. What is the concern? The concern is that everyone wants to study human thinking methods, but we need to make sure we do not lose our own scientific development in the process. If all our best minds go to alien universities, what happens to research on Earth? It was a valid worry. The galaxy's sudden interest in human cognitive abilities could drain Earth of its scientific talent if not managed carefully. I think the answer is balance, Hana said. We should share our perspectives with galactic civilization, but we should also bring galactic knowledge back to Earth. The goal should be mutual benefit, not one-sided exchange. She had been thinking about this problem herself. Her success at the Institute was opening doors for humanity, but it was also creating responsibilities. How could humans contribute to galactic science while still maintaining their own scientific independence? The answer came from an unexpected source. Professor Vorthak, who had become one of her strongest supporters after initially opposing her, made a proposal to the Institute's High Council. We should establish branch campuses of the Galactic Sciences Institute on multiple worlds, he suggested, including Earth. This would allow human students to receive advanced education without leaving their home system, while still participating in the broader galactic scientific community. The proposal was approved with enthusiastic support. Within 6 months, construction would begin on the first Galactic Sciences Institute campus in Earth orbit. Hana would return home to serve as its first director, bringing alien faculty and human students together in a new model of collaborative education. As her first year at the Institute drew to a close, Hana often reflected on how much had changed. She kept her original notebooks from those first weeks when she had struggled to understand basic concepts. Now those same concepts formed the foundation of courses she taught to some of the galaxy's brightest minds. The textbook that had once seemed impossibly advanced was now outdated. Hana's theories had revolutionized the field so completely that new textbooks were being written based on her research. Students throughout the galaxy studied Lee's dynamic barrier theory and human interdisciplinary methodology. But perhaps the most satisfying change was in how different species viewed each other. The rigid hierarchies that had once dominated galactic civilization were beginning to soften. Young researchers were encouraged to question established theories, to look for connections between different fields, and to consider perspectives from other species and cultures. On her last day of classes before returning to Earth, Hannah stood again in the lecture hall where she had first struggled to take notes. Now she was giving a farewell address to the faculty and students who had become her colleagues and friends. When I first arrived here, she said, I thought my job was to learn from you. I thought that because your civilizations were older and more advanced, you had nothing to learn from someone like me. I was wrong about that. She looked out at the mixed audience of different species, all listening intently to her words. The truth is that every perspective has value. Every way of thinking can contribute to our understanding of the universe. The Valthrans taught me the importance of systematic analysis. The Nexari showed me how to see patterns and connections. The Othic demonstrated the power of focused, deep thinking. She paused, gathering her thoughts for the final point she wanted to make. But humans contributed something too. We brought the willingness to question everything, to cross boundaries between different fields and to challenge established ideas. We brought what I call productive chaos, the ability to see new possibilities in familiar problems. The audience applauded, but Hannah held up her hand to continue. The future of galactic science depends on all of us working together, not because humans are special, but because diversity of thought is special. When different minds approach the same problems, we discover solutions that none of us could find alone. As she packed her belongings that evening, Hannah found the recording device Professor Vorthak had given her on her first day. The simple crystal tablet that was supposed to help her transcribe lectures had instead become the tool that revolutionized galactic science. She wrote a final entry in her personal log. They gave me a notepad and expected transcription. Instead, humanity gave them a new way of seeing the universe. Sometimes the most primitive approach is exactly what advanced civilizations need to break through their own limitations. I came here to Lee,